WVCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And we thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on VCY America. Friends, we've got a program packed full of info. We need you to stay tuned. Last week, the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum was held in Davos, Switzerland. The theme this year was a spirit of dialogue. It was reported that this annual meeting had record leaders turn out, a record number of political leaders, alongside top executives and investors. And in light of the Trump presidency, there's rather a new landscape, not only at this forum, but in other globalist bodies as well, as far as discussion points and so forth. And just before I introduce our guest today, I'd like to go back to the World Economic Forum of 2025 and play an audio clip from that forum just 1 year ago. This was right after President Trump's inauguration, in which one of the discussions took place indicating that Trump won and we lost. Let's go back in time.
Trump has done something no person in the world has ever done before. A dead man, a dead politician, has risen. Somebody who, if we were 4 years ago at Davos, he's buried, dead politically, known to me. He's now returned. This is the greatest comeback in political history of a politician. And then, therefore, he thinks he can do anything.
We need to also factor in not only who's won, which is Trump, but who's lost, which is to say us. And I guess I would throw into that the epitome of the us who is losing here is Europe. That the European Union and by and large its member states have misread the direction where events were going.
The causes that it is interested in, climate, human rights, some others, as well as the methods of diplomacy that it prefers, are simply being gradually kind of marginalized as something new, not necessarily something better, but something new moves into the center.
Okay, so very interesting. This is from Davos 2025. Joining us today, we welcome back Alex Newman. He is an award-winning international freelance journalist. He's an author, he's a researcher, an educator, and a consultant. He is senior editor for The New American, and he has co-authored Crimes of the Educators, author of Deep State, the Invisible Government Behind the Scenes, and also the book Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, a brand new book. Now, I just learned about today, Woke and Weaponized, how Karl Marx won the battle for American education and how we can win it back. We're going to have to do a program on that. He is a founder and CEO of Liberty Sentinel and a national syndicator of radio and TV programs, including Behind the Deep State, that airs on WVCY television and VCY.tv. Alex, welcome back to Crosstalk.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Jim.
So you just heard that clip from 2025. It seems to me that the Trump presidency even provoked the title for this year, a spirit of dialogue. But give us your opening comments on the impact of Donald Trump on the World Economic Forum.
Well, Donald Trump has been really a bull in the china shop when it comes to the architecture of globalism. And the World Economic Forum is obviously one of the premier public-facing globalist institutions in the world. Its role really, as it itself defines it, is to bring the business community to the table on these issues of globalization. So they even signed like a strategic partnership with the United Nations to bring business leaders, CEOs, the Fortune 500, the Fortune 1000, into this kind of new paradigm, the Sustainable Development Goals and all the rest of it. So clearly, they don't like Donald Trump. Clearly, they don't like the things that Donald Trump says. Clearly, they don't like the people who voted for Donald Trump, right? Mm-hmm. Donald Trump has spoken very clearly, not with typical political speak and beating around the bush. He's spoken very clearly about his view on globalism. He rejects it. He says we need to protect national sovereignty. He says that the United States has been abused and run over by these international organizations and these international agreements. And so clearly they were very alarmed when Donald Trump won. Now, I would quibble a little bit with their characterization of this, that Trump was a dead politician and he lost in 2020. I don't believe for one moment that Joe Biden got 81 million votes, far more than Barack Obama got. So I believe personally he won 2020 as well. But it is true that what he did was very remarkable, very unique in the history of the world. And I think at this moment, if you listen to, and I know you've got some clips, and I know we'll talk about this year's World Economic Forum, but to me it really looked like an exercise in trying to make lemonade out of lemons. They're very upset with the direction things are going in the United States, but that doesn't mean they've given up on their dreams. That doesn't mean they're just going to roll over and play dead. They're going to keep, as they themselves are saying, they're going to keep moving us toward the new world order, just using some different tactics and some different approaches going forward.
So who is leading the World Economic Forum now? What can you tell us about them?
Well, they did wheel Klaus Schwab off stage left, and I think what we're watching here really is an interesting parallel with the de-Stalinization process in Soviet Russia. Right? Stalin had become so monstrously unpopular. I mean, this was a guy who murdered probably more people than almost any other human being in the history of the world, more than Adolf Hitler. Chairman Mao might be one of the few who could give him a run for his money. And he was relatively unpopular with the Soviet people. And so the Communist Party and the Soviet Union decided, well, we need to pretend like we don't approve of that anymore. And so they had this de-Stalinization process. I think that's kind of what we're witnessing at the World Economic Forum. They said some things about him, that maybe he wasn't the best leader, and maybe there were some allegations of misuse of funds and things like that. But ultimately, they let him go off into the sunset and retire nicely. The new people leading are really the same as the old people. They still believe the same things. Larry Fink seems to be the new kind of public-facing leader. Yes, technically he's the co-chair, but he was already on the board of trustees for the World Economic Forum. He's also on the board of directors for the Council on Foreign Relations here in the United States. And we know what Larry Fink thinks. He's told us many times what he thinks, that businesses are going to have to change, behaviors are going to have to change, you're going to have to get in line. He says markets prefer tyrannical governments, which is absolutely and utterly preposterous, right? Show me a tyrannical society with a tyrannical government that has innovated, that has produced large amounts of wealth. It's absurd. But he's very clearly a globalist, very clearly in line with the values of Klaus Schwab and the people behind the scenes, the kind of Henry Kissinger who recruited Klaus Schwab, David Rockefeller who recruited Henry Kissinger, and I would argue ultimately Satan who recruited the Rockefellers. So, they're still very much in line with this globalist idea. Of course, you have the Norwegian politician, Mr. Rende, all very much in line with what Klaus Schwab believed. But if you listen to the rhetoric this time around, they're still pushing the same stuff, but they definitely took a softer tone, I think, in light of what we're seeing around the world with Javier Milei and Donald Trump and Viktor Orban and the comeback now that we're watching of the Bolsonaro dynasty in Brazil. They recognize that there's a lot of public opposition, and at least they're acknowledging that.
Indeed. Well, President Trump did travel with a pretty large contingency there, and he brought up several issues in a speech, one of which was Greenland. I'd like to air just a brief clip on this and have you comment. This is President Trump at the World Economic Forum.
We never asked for anything, and we never got anything. We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force, where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay? Now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made, because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland, where we already had it, as a trustee, but respectfully returned it back to Denmark not long ago after we defeated the Germans, the Japanese, the Italians, and others in World War II. We gave it back to them. We were a powerful force then, but we are a much more powerful force now after I rebuilt the military in my first term and continue to do so today.
Let's talk about Greenland, Alex. Is President Trump right on Greenland?
Well, it's an interesting question. He is factually correct here in what he said. We did take Greenland when Denmark was overrun by Nazis, and we did return it to them, which, the United States is one of a very small handful of nations in the history of the world that has taken over and conquered mighty, mighty governments, mighty empires, and then returned everything and asked for nothing in return except, a little tiny bit of space where we could bury our dead soldiers. And so what he said was factually correct. I know a lot of people around the world, within international institutions, certainly within Europe, and certainly within NATO, breathed a sigh of relief when Trump made clear that he was not going to use military force.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's thinking in terms of Greenland. Yes, I understand it has strategic value. Yes, I understand it could be used. I mean, the reason we took it back during the Second World War was because we thought the Nazis might use it as a base to launch attacks on the United States and Canada. So it's certainly a legitimate concern, I think, from a national security perspective. But, if you look at what Trump voters care about, very few people went into the voting booth and pulled the lever for Donald Trump thinking, I hope he secures Greenland. But who has been very interested in Greenland, as Patrick Wood has explained masterfully, is the technocrats going back over 100 years who are interested in creating a North American technate. So it's hard to really know what Trump is thinking about these things. I know he's got some advisors that are telling him this is very important, but at least on the factual front, he was correct, and certainly what he said about declining to use military force was a big relief to a lot of people who were watching around the world.
Yeah, and I think part of that also deals with this Golden Dome, which we'll walk ourselves into here in just a moment. But going into this World Economic Forum, prior to this even getting underway last week, we have Canada's Prime Minister Carney. He worked out a trade deal with China that he called, he references as being, the New World Order. Let's hear the clip, and then we're also going to be hearing from President Trump on this matter as well. Here's Prime Minister Carney.
Mine is the first visit of a Canadian Prime Minister to China in nearly a decade. The world has changed much since that last visit. And I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
Very clear, Alex, talking about this new world order in context of their partnership with China, communist China. Your comments, because this sets us up for what President Trump later rebuked Prime Minister Carney as well.
Yeah, and this is about as clear a statement from a leading globalist as we've heard in a very long time. It's not something that's new to people who followed this closely. In fact, in 2015, I wrote a cover story in the New American magazine called China Staking Claim in the New World Order. And you and I have done a whole episode just on communist China. I would encourage people to go back and listen to that in the archives. Communist China, as should have been clear to people a long time ago, is both the model for the New World Order. I mean, that's the kind of society these globalists are trying to build, where everything is controlled, there is no free speech, your social credit score determines what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot access, totally godless, ruthless persecution of genuine Christian churches. You can worship in the state-approved communist fake Christian church, but you certainly cannot believe the Bible and live out your faith in a society like China. And so communist China is very much the model for this new system. But it's also one of the key drivers. Now, for over 40 years, the World Economic Forum, by Klaus Schwab's own admission, has been building up communist China economically and politically and militarily. People like Larry Fink have invested enormous amounts of American money and American capital into communist China, including into industries that have very obvious military applications. And so what they're doing here is they're restructuring the world order with communist China at the center of it.
Friends, we're going to pause right here. Alex Newman is our guest. We'll be back in 1 minute. This is Crosstalk on VCY America as we cover the World Economic Forum, a spirit of dialogue.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, creation author with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, you say that there was no death before Adam sinned. But what about plants? I mean, didn't Adam eat plants?
Yes, Chris. Adam and Eve did eat plants in the Garden of Eden. But was this really death in the biblical sense? There's a profound theological distinction between plants and animals in the Bible. Both man and the animals are described as having life, Hebrew nephesh, which plants don't have. The term life is reserved for those animals in whose nostrils is the breath of life, and also by the fact that life is in the blood. Plants have neither breath nor blood. Thus, the eating of a plant in the Garden of Eden wouldn't necessarily involve death. Plants are biologically alive, but they're not biblically alive in the sense that they do not have true life. You see, Chris, there's always an answer to the anti-creationist questions. Back to Genesis. Now that works.
Thanks, Dr. Morris.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Alex Newman is with us today. He has an organization known as Liberty Sentinel, libertysentinel.org. Also senior editor for The New American, thenewamerican.com. Alex, as I mentioned at the introduction at the beginning of the program, you just have released a brand new book called Woke and Weaponized. I know we're dealing with World Economic Forum, but give us a sentence or two about this book and where our listeners can obtain it.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. And of course, the education issue actually, I believe, transcends all the other issues, very much including these issues of globalism and economic globalization, because they've got to capture the hearts and minds of the young people. So what I did, I teamed up with Robert Bortons, who is a friend. He's also the CEO of Classical Conversations. It's the largest homeschooling network in the world with over 140,000 students around the world, including my own children. And what we did was we traced the history of the occultists and the communists who were involved in the government school, and then we really tried to focus heavily on solutions, because there's a lot of talk now about how bad the system has gotten, but a lot of what's happening in the way of so-called answers to these problems we think are quite dangerous. So we try to lay out a biblical and philosophical case for really parent-led, family-led education. And I think it's going to be a really important book. Like you said, it just came out, and I hope we can talk about it more at a future date.
Sure. And it's available at?
Right now, it's available on Amazon. It's also available on my website, libertysentinel.org, if you click on the shop button or the store button. And it will be available on Prime if people want like overnight delivery or whatever. That'll be available in just a week or so. But even right now, you can get it on Amazon, free shipping, and you'll have it very soon. Very
good. Again, that's called Woke and Weaponized. Well, Alex, we were talking about the World Economic Forum annual meeting that wrapped up last week, and we're talking about this New World Order with Prime Minister Carney talking about this, entering into partnership with Communist China. And it's important that we understand further about this New World Order and really doing a shakeup of how we've known things here on planet Earth into a new system. So go ahead and comment on that, if you would.
Well, we're watching probably the most profound restructuring of the geopolitical system really since World War II. It's hard to overestimate how enormous this is. And we're still, I would say, in the early stages of it. I think it's going to get very turbulent, probably in the not-too-distant future. But for well over a decade now, if you read globalist publications, like, for example, Foreign Affairs that the Council on Foreign Relations publishes, they've been kind of quietly advocating for a shift away from what they call the unipolar world order. Just briefly to define that, because I know that's new language to most people. They're talking about the United States-led global order that emerged in the aftermath of World War II, right? The British Empire was essentially crumbling, and the United States of America was basically 50% of global GDP, by far the most powerful military in the world, and the most powerful currency. Of course, we still had the gold-backed dollar at that time. And so since the end of World War II, the United States has really been the unchallengeable hegemonic power in the world. And that system is now coming to an end, and it's giving way toward what the globalists have labeled the multipolar world order. So instead of the unipolar, with one pole of power being the United States of America, this new system that they, by the way, engineered, right? This isn't an organic process, although they'd like us to believe that it is. It's a system where you have multiple poles of power. And so the United States might still be there as a key player, but we will see the rise of, I think, primarily the CCP, Beijing, Moscow, the BRICS nations, and maybe even more importantly, these regional governments. And this is one of the things that came out really clearly at the World Economic Forum is, hey, we're just going to focus on consolidating our gains within the European Union. The European Union is going to stand on its own as its own geopolitical entity, and so I would imagine Brussels will be one of the key poles in this new multipolar world order. But it's going to look very different. The global system, if the globalists get their way, it's going to look very different than the world order has looked for the last 80 years or so.
We're going to follow up that clip we heard from Prime Minister Carney prior to World Economic Forum. And even at the forum, he was told of, talking against the United States and his comments not being so flattering and so forth. But President Trump, when he is at the podium, he rebuked him. And we're going to hear what President Trump had to say.
For national and international security, and to keep our very energetic and dangerous potential enemies at bay, is this land on which we're going to build the greatest golden dome ever built. We're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
Wow. He pulled no punches there either, did he?
No, he's very blunt, and that's one of the things that I think some people really like about him and some people really dislike about him, is that he doesn't speak always in diplomatic terms and formalities and niceties. And of course what he said is true, right? Canada has been defended by the United States now for many, many generations. Canada is entirely dependent, economically speaking, on the United States. But we see now Carney, who, by the way, is the quintessential globalist. I mean, this is a man who led the Bank of England, who led the Bank of Canada, who was on the board of the World Economic Forum. He is in every respect a tried and true globalist. And Trump is right. You would think that leaders of Canada would have the decency to at least acknowledge the benefits that they get from their relationship with the United States. And it's not just Canada, of course. The United States has subsidized the defense of most of the West, whether it's Australia, New Zealand, Western Europe, Canada, obviously. And, I don't think Americans expect Canadians to just constantly be thanking us, but it would be nice to at least acknowledge it from time to time and certainly not spit in our faces.
Right. Alex, on another front here, do you think that there's a move afoot to somehow sow discord between the United States and Canada to try and interrupt that relationship?
Well, I think there is, but there's also a parallel track where they want to merge eventually the United States, Canada, and Mexico into a North American Union. And this has been on the table for a very long time. But I think to go to Gavin Newsom, who, of course, attended the World Economic Forum, I understand he was removed from the speaker's roster before he gave his big speech. But if you listen, for example, to what he said there, or even what he said when I was in Brazil covering the UN Climate Summit with New American, he called Trump in the Amazon rainforest. He said he was an invasive species, and he's not a permanent fixture of American politics. And so I think the globalist tactic right now is to try to associate Trump with all of these ideas that the globalists hate, and then ultimately so discredit Donald Trump that any ideas he was associated with would be abhorrent to normal people, and any ideas he was against would be de facto desirable. And so I think right now, yes, there is an effort to divide the United States and Canada, and certainly the West and what we used to call Christendom. But once Trump is out of office, right, as per Gavin Newsom, Trump's only there for 3 more years. He's not a permanent fixture of American politics. Then they hope, I think, that they can get their big liberal, big globalist back into power, and then continue the process of merging the United States with Canada and Mexico and maybe other nations as well.
Yeah, and they've made making agreements as liberal as possible without U.S. involvement, trying to force the U.S. to go back into those. You and I talked about that on a recent program as well. But all of that is afoot. There's more on President Trump I certainly could play, but I'd like to also talk about Finland's president, Alexander Stubb, indicating they could do it alone without the United States and then later backtrack. Here's what he had to say initially in that, it was kind of a forum. They had a few speakers at the time. Here's his part and the question he was asked.
President Stubb, I'd like to ask you first. Do you see this sense of urgency for a plan B? Among your European partners? Is there the need for that? And who should lead the charge? Because, I mean, it's a bit unfair. We're sitting here on the panel with Finland and Poland. You are really doing a lot when it comes to defense, especially Finland. You have this comprehensive approach to defense in your country. Are your partners, are they experiencing the urgency? Who needs to come up with the plan B and lead the charge?
Well, I mean, 2 answers. First is a direct answer to the question of this panel, can Europe defend itself? My answer is unequivocally yes.
Without the Americans?
Without the Americans. I mean...
How?
Well, look...
But you're relying on them for these key elements. How would you do it at scale and at duration and at intensity?
With an assumption that the United States would cut off completely any kind of work.
Yeah.
Well, if we look at the defense composure of Europe by and large, and a country like Finland, so how do we do it? We have conscription. 1 million have done it. We can mobilize 280,000 soldiers within weeks. We have 62 F-18s. Your next question is going to be, do they fly without Americans? No, they don't. But do we trust that they will continue to fly because it's in the interest of America to do so? Yes. We just bought 64 F-35s. We have the biggest artillery in Europe together with Poland. We have long-range missiles, land, sea, and air. We don't have these because we're worried about Stockholm, right? So the bottom line is that if you ask me the question that can the Finnish military defend itself against a Russian attack, the whole defense posture of the way in which you do it, yes, we can. But then the second question which you were alluding to, I think we also have to understand that you fight wars on the battlefield, but you win them at home.
You know, that's a pretty bold statement, Alex.
It is, and it almost sounds like the rantings of a madman. Now, I will give the Finns credit. They historically have been very valiant in their efforts to defend themselves. In fact, their defense against the Russians was just absolutely astounding. I mean, it's still talked about to this day how good the Finnish snipers were and how good the Finnish soldiers were defending their country against the Soviet invasion. But we need to be realistic here. Finland is a country of about 5 million people. Even if they got the other Europeans and Scandinavians together, these militaries are essentially a joke. I've lived in Scandinavia. They're most famous for running down the streets of downtown with the pride parades and flying the pride flags and dancing. And, I think Putin probably gets a big kick out of statements like that. Yeah. And so realistically, the idea that the Europeans, as they are presently armed and outfitted and trained, could defend themselves against a serious attack by the Russians, it's simply ludicrous.
Yeah, it is. And what's interesting, because this came back up later in their conversation, listen to the backtracking taking place here.
You've said earlier that Europe can defend itself without the Americans. If it comes down...
not exact. That's not a quote.
More or less. We'll go back to the transcript. More or less.
I love journalists.
Yeah, I love journalists. More or less, it just, that's not an exact quote, but we go back and listen. It was pretty close.
Yeah, it certainly was. And, I'll give credit to some of the European nations. Of course, the Swiss are still very well armed and very capable. Every man there has gone through military training. Every man from, I believe, 18 to 34 is armed and trained, and they've got defensive fortifications in the mountains. But for the most part, Europe has done virtually nothing to properly defend itself, really going all the way back to since World War II. And if they were to get into a conflict and the United States were not to defend them, I don't think they would do very well. And it seems like the Finnish leader kind of realized how silly he must have sounded and backtracked, I think, wisely.
Yeah, you're right. He looked a little embarrassed as that came back at him. We're going to take a quick break. And friends, believe it or not, Al Gore is still on the scene attending one of the workshops. And we're going to be hearing a clip from him as well. Alex Newman with us today here on Crosstalk, senior editor for The New American, website thenewamerican.com, and also his own site, libertysentinel.org. He is founder and CEO of Liberty Sentinel. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
The one book that's been credited as one of the major catalysts for the modern creationist movement is The Genesis Flood, authored by Dr. John Whitcomb and Dr. Henry Morris. More than 60 years ago, these two men joined together to write a controversial book that sparked dialogue and debate on Darwin, Jesus, science, the Bible, evolution, creation, and gave birth to the modern creation science movement. While skeptics cast doubt upon the authenticity of a universal flood, the Genesis flood places before the reader the theological and scientific basis for a literal acceptance of the biblical account. This book provides illustrations, charts, diagrams, and sound documentation that harmonizes science with biblical truth. The Genesis Flood is available for a donation of $30 or more to VCY America. Call 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Alex Newman with us on the broadcast today. And friends, if you're setting your calendars for this year, September 19, Alex is scheduled to speak at our VCY rally at the Waukesha Expo, Waukesha, Wisconsin. That's coming up September 19. It's a free event. We will take up a free will offering that evening to help offset the expenses of the evening, but plan to be out on September 19, Saturday evening, 6 p.m. at the Waukesha Expo. Alex, it's kind of hard to believe, but Al Gore still on the scene, despite all his failed predictions that would be happening. But he attended one of the workshops and conveyed the view that farmers should grow less food to fight climate change and to be paid for it. Let's just hear from Al Gore.
But the role of policy, which we're discussing here, is crucial in agriculture as well. In the U.S., the largest source of government subsidies to farmers is in a program called crop insurance. The title is a bit misleading. But in order to qualify for these subsidies, farmers basically have to assure the government that they are not going to engage in regenerative agriculture because the incentives have been to produce as much as possible, as quickly as possible, fence row to fence row, instead of taking care of the productivity of the soil and not depleting its vitality. So we need policies that, in recognition of the fact that governments around the world typically do subsidize farming, but don't subsidize them in ways that incentivize them to go in the wrong direction, but incentivize them to go in the right direction. That's your point, isn't it?
Absolutely. And Alex, who determines what that right direction is? I mean, when you talk about sustainable development, it is really lowering and controlling the food supply across the world.
That's right. And we've been talking about this for so many years. There is a deliberate agenda to undermine the food supply, really to transform the food supply. And they've gotten more and more vocal about this. John Kerry and Al Gore and many others have openly talked about how farmers and ranchers are producing, they say, 1/3 of all the greenhouse gas emissions. They never point out the fact that they also produce 100% of our food, which I'm always astounded by. I mean, people like to eat, right? Maybe that's why they don't talk about that. But the agenda to destroy traditional agriculture, the agenda to eliminate small family farms and medium-sized farms and consolidate everything in the hands of these mega corporations with government backing, with ties to the government, continues apace. And I think if you look at what they've been doing for years now, this is not a new phenomenon. It's been partially reversed in the United States by Donald Trump. People probably remember how they were killing all the chickens even in the final days of the Biden administration, or the guise of bird flu. And, of course, now the chickens are back and egg prices have gone down, thankfully. But there is an agenda to destroy our food production systems and replace them with new systems that are entirely controlled. And I'm not surprised Al Gore is still talking about it. I'm not surprised he's still promoting it because, again, they fully intend to resume with this agenda just as soon as they get Donald Trump out of the way, even if they have to wait a full 3 years.
Yeah. Well, something else that came up at the World Economic Forum is this Board of Peace. So give us your comments on this Board of Peace because there's quite the cast of characters that are involved with this.
There are, and I think that's one of the really troubling things. I was looking at the list of the so-called leaders who are involved, and very, very quickly becomes apparent that some of these are brutal dictators. I was in Azerbaijan, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, where Mr. Aliyev is the Islamo-Marxist dictator. I mean, this is a guy who imprisons his critics and tortures them. I mean, if we're going to be trying to create an institution that kind of runs parallel to the United Nations but has more credibility, these are not the kinds of people you want to be inviting there. I think Trump may have a soft spot for Mr. Aliyev because he signed this peace deal with the Armenians that he had been terrorizing and murdering for so long, the Christians. But I've got some really serious questions about this Board of Peace. And, of course, I'm not the first person to notice that this appears to be an effort to set up a parallel international structure. Mm-hmm. If you listen to what Trump himself said, right, once we have this thing up and running, we'll be able to do basically whatever we want. I think that should be concerning, right? We here in the United States, we believe in limited government. We believe in a constitution that defines what governments can and can't do. Our Constitution, of course, grants limited powers, a very small number of powers to the federal government. But to look at the structure of this Board of Peace, to look at the people who are involved, to look at the tasks that they've been given. Obviously, the first one is this Gaza initiative. I'm troubled by it for several reasons. For one, it looks like they're trying to build some kind of technocratic 15-minute city that I guess would be a pilot for future cities like that all around the world. There's a lot of things to be concerned about this. Now, I fully agree with Donald Trump that the United Nations has not been effective in bringing about peace, but I can't help but think about the biblical admonition, when they say peace and safety, peace and security, a sudden destruction shall come upon them.
Yeah.
But we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, I see the Pope's been invited to be a part of this too.
Yeah, it's almost biblical.
You're right.
So, yeah, it's very interesting. And I certainly understand Trump's frustration with the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
He's done, I think, a very good job of undermining some of its key pillars and institutions. Just a few weeks ago announced we were getting out of several dozen additional UN agencies, but I don't think the goal should be to replace them with some sort of new and improved international organization. I think the real question is, do we really want international bureaucracies doing the kinds of things that these UN agencies were doing, and now that some of these things that the Board of Peace has been tasked with?
I know there's all kinds of speakers. I find it interesting that the president of Argentina followed President Trump in his presentation because he's been very much, he has not gone the woke direction of the World Economic Forum. So that was an interesting address there as well.
Yeah, it was. And he spoke last year, too, and really kind of told it like it is. I was especially impressed to hear him saying that if we want to restore liberty and freedom and free markets and civilization, we needed to go back to biblical values. He said Judeo-Christian principles. And so, I think what Javier Milei is doing for Argentina is really spectacular. He's managed to turn a country that was on its way down the drain around very, very quickly, economically speaking, in terms of cutting government, restoring people's liberties. And I'm personally surprised that he got an invitation to speak at the World Economic Forum. It may have just been to try to look inclusive and try to bring everybody under the tent, but I was very pleased to hear his remarks.
I'd like to bring in another clip of Yuval Noah Harari speaking of AI at this World Economic Forum, AI controlling the world's legal, education, and healthcare systems, but also talked about AI taking over religion. Friends, here is the clip.
As far as putting words in order is concerned, AI already thinks better than many of us. Therefore, anything made of words will be taken over by AI. If laws are made of words, then AI will take over the legal system. If books are just combinations of words, then AI will take over books. If religion is built from words, then AI will take over religion. This is particularly true of religions based on books, like Islam, Christianity, or Judaism. Judaism calls itself the religion of the book, and it grants ultimate authority not to humans, but to words in books. Humans have authority in Judaism not because of our experiences, but only because we learn words in books. Now, no human can read and remember all the words in all the Jewish books, but AI can easily do that. What happens to a religion of the book when the greatest expert on the holy book is an AI?
Alex, that's creepy.
It is very creepy. And, first of all, John comes to mind where he says there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And here he devalues the idea of the Word as if it were just some kind of human concoction, some kind of human invention that a technological system could master. But he brings up what I think is a very good point. I've noticed, Jim, and I'm sure you've seen this, more and more pastors are actually relying on AI to get theological interpretations, to prepare sermons that they're using to feed the flock. And I think this is a very dangerous trend, especially when we know, Jim, we have concrete proof. These people talk publicly, they give speeches, and they write essays. The people programming these AIs, the people leading the companies that are creating these AIs, are godless at best, in some cases outright anti-Christian bigots. And so, should we really be getting our theology and our understanding of the mind of God revealed to us through His Word from computer programs that were written and developed by people who hate Him or suppress the truth in their unrighteousness in an effort to avoid acknowledging Him? And I think the answer is self-evident for Christians. Absolutely not.
Exactly. And to hear him say these words, I mean, it's just shocking. But you're right, Alex. So when we have pastors that are turning to AI to get their messages or their points and other aspects of putting their messages together, it's frightening that many will go right away to AI rather than, God, help your spirit and the Spirit of God to help me understand what it is I'm reading here and help me to teach and proclaim this to my congregation. I mean, instead of depending upon the Spirit of God, we're depending upon AI.
Right, amen, and that is so important for people to remember. And I think this issue is only going to grow in importance. It's only going to grow in severity. The danger is only going to grow. And I think AI is ultimately a tool. It's a technology, and it certainly can be used for good purposes. Mm-hmm. But there are so many red flags here that we need to be aware of. And as AI becomes more and more powerful, takes over more and more areas of decision making from human beings, even within the church, we've got a real problem on our hands. And so I would urge people to be in prayer about this, and for pastors especially, be very aware of these dangers and do not rely on AI. Like you said, Jim, we need to rely on God's Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. We have everything we need to understand His Word, what He wants revealed to us, and we don't need these tools that have been developed, again, by people who hate God or refuse to acknowledge God to properly understand and apply His Word.
Friends, our number to Crosstalk today is 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. Your questions or brief comments today, 800-733-9829. And just on this AI issue, it was the same man who not too long ago talked about when we're going through the time of COVID and how we monitor where people were going. And he talked about, monitoring temperature and so forth. But he said, we've been surveilling what's happening outside the body. Now we need to surveil what's going on inside the body, and even getting into our own thoughts as well. He even challenged the people at this World Economic Forum about thinking of this next word and comparing, even AI putting words and thoughts into people's minds.
Yeah, and if you listen to Yuval Noah Harari over the years, I mean, this is a guy who openly mocks God. He says the resurrection of Christ is fake news. He actually mocks the God of the Bible. He says, well, this God can only create organic life forms like trees and giraffes. Now we're going to be like God, except we're going to be better. We'll be able to create inorganic life forms. I would encourage people to reread Romans 1. Yeah. In fact, man is an avowed homosexual, and recognize that we are dealing with something very, very dangerous here. And there were some good points in his speech. I'll give him credit. There were some good points in his speech about some of the totalitarian dangers, but he was making the points for the wrong reason. His argument now is, well, we need world government to protect us from the potential dangers of AI, which is, of course, ludicrous.
When they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Friends, they returned from the truth. And we are speaking to you here today on Crosstalk, dealing with this World Economic Forum. Alex Newman, our guest, and taking your calls at 800-733-9829. Back in a minute. You're on Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. The nation is reeling after an ICU nurse was shot on video combating with ICE. Now, this is an emotional issue, no doubt, and tragic. But here I am to tell you, my friends, let's pull back multiple feet, 30,000-foot view. We have many countries, Mexico, Iran, and China, working to increase the chaos in the streets. We apparently have people inside state governments feeding information about the whereabouts of federal ICE officers. So, my friends, understand this is more than just an emotional issue, as many are now looking at it as a tragic and emotional issue. This is a civil war. We are in a form of civil war, but we're also in a form of war nation state to nation state, as enemies foreign and domestic are trying to weaponize our immigration system, castigate any political opposition as dangerous terrorist Nazis to be dealt with. So, my friends, it's a spiritual battle. It's a worldview battle. Don't let emotion trip you up. I'm Brennan House.
This is Crosstalk on the VCY American Network. Alex Newman with us as we're reviewing the World Economic Forum's meeting last week. A spirit of dialogue concluded this past Friday. So much that transpired we did not even get to. But Alex, I know your team covered a lot of this as well, and writing it through Liberty Sentinel or thenewamerican.com, correct?
Yes, we did. Yeah, we had a lot of coverage. In fact, my latest episode of Behind the Deep State was also focused on this, and we pulled a lot of clips from there. And, of course, this is one of the most important events of the year from the perspective of the globalists. And so we think it's important for people to at least pay attention and see what's going on with the world so that we can understand it through a biblical lens.
Scott is calling from Conneaut, Ohio. Scott, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, fellow believers and those that look for Jesus' return. I think this is usurping of God's authority and power, as he would steal the word of God from people's hearts. And as Romans said, their dark minds were darkened to take over the throne of God by his word. I mean, come on, folks, we need Jesus to save us.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Scott, for sharing that. And really, Alex, that's where a solution is. It's not who occupies the Oval Office, it's who occupies your heart.
Amen. And that really is the main takeaway, is the main thing, what Jesus Christ did on the cross for us 2,000 years ago to redeem people and forgive us of our sins and adopt us into the family of God and bring us into the kingdom of light, translate us out of the kingdom of darkness. And, many of these people who are involved in these World Economic Forum and these circles, unfortunately, the Bible says so many have been taken captive by Satan to do his will. And, we've got to understand and we've got to share the truth.
Mark and Monroe, you're on the air.
Yeah, my comment is AI cannot solve the depravity of man. No. And AI is incapable of peace because only the Prince of Peace can bring that into being. So, alluding back to the Board of Peace, maybe at best there will be some sort of moderate temporary peace that might be apparent, but that's all it would be, is short term. So the whole AI thing is really going to expound into being what I refer to at best as a weapon of mass deception. So that's my comment.
Indeed, and that's part of the characteristics of latter days too. Paul warned Timothy about this new also last days perilous times would come describe those, but he used, Alex, the term deceived and being deceived, and deception is a massive part of what's going on, whether it's coming from World Economic Forum or the United Nations or the World Health Organization. Deception is way at the top of the list.
Absolutely. It's one of the critical tools of the enemy, and we're seeing it now just proliferate. It's just unbelievable how much deception is going on, to the point where I think even a lot of well-meaning, conservative-minded Americans are being deceived, and so we always need to go back to the Word of God, which is our standard of truth.
Julianne is calling from Chatfield, Minnesota. Julianne, you're on the air.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I have a question regarding the AI. My question being that, is there a way we could have actually a program, even if they could make something like this happen, but the AI developers, I'm always wondering, who are these individuals? What's their history? What's their belief system? What's their moral values? It would be so great to know, and then expose these people to who they are, so that the public and the media, radio media, if nothing else, could get a better grip on what we're dealing with, where we're believing everything that this AI system is telling us, and informing people so they can be wise and come to know when to discern listening to them and not type thing.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that. And let me just mention a few things, and that is, number one, we've done several programs on AI ourselves here on Crosstalk, but you can go back into crosstalkamerica.com and put in artificial intelligence. We did a full program with Pastor Richard Schmidt, the former sheriff of Milwaukee County, who's authored a book on artificial intelligence, transhumanism, de-evolution, and the democracy. Let's see, the subtitle, The Devolution of Democracy. And the book is available. The interview is available online to listen to that. We've got another program coming up. I think it's early next week, just on AI. But Alex, this is something that again, you've written about. The New American has many articles on this as well.
Yeah, it's I've been digging into this for a long time, and to the caller's point, if you look at some of the key players here, they're very well known. Bill Gates and Microsoft, of course, are giants in the AI space. Google is a major player in the AI world. People like Sam Altman, even people like Elon Musk. He often says conservative things, and he often gives positions that line up in some ways with what the Bible teaches. But even Elon Musk himself has publicly said he's not a Christian. So even the people who seem to sometimes be on our side, who are involved with these AIs, are not Bible-believing Christians. And I think it's, like the caller said, it's very important for people to have an awareness of this.
Indeed. Thank you, Julianne. And again, that book on artificial intelligence available here through our switchboard at VCY. Paul is calling from Cameron. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you, Jim, for taking my call. Yes, I only have one question. What does the acronym WOKE stand for?
The acronym. I don't know. Is it an acronym, Alex? I thank you for the call. I remember speaking with Elaine Donnelly one time here in Crosstalk, and she talked about wokeism is taking progressive or liberalism to extremes with coercion, even if it hurts the institution. I don't know. Is woke a acronym for something?
No, woke is a term that was developed by the progressives themselves, because once, in their thinking, once you see the oppression that's everywhere, the racial oppression, the gender oppression, the cisgender versus transgender, the heteronormative oppression, once you are awake, once you are woke, then you see the oppression everywhere. And so that's where that term comes from. That's actually a term they came up with for themselves that I think conservatives and Christians have in many cases wisely used to label them. So.
Right, indeed. Well, the theme music is already playing. Our close is on. We've run out of time. Not able to grab any more phone calls. But as always, Alex, thank you for joining us, and always appreciate your insight on these critical topics.
It's an honor, pleasure. Thank you, Jim, and God bless you.
And friends, again, check out Alex's website, his new book as well, that is available. And let's see, libertysentinel.org, libertysentinel.org. You'll find his writings also at thenewamerican.com. God bless you, friends. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.